There are other things that can lead a girl into lesbianism. Sexual abuse is certainly an issue for a lot of girls that can confuse them sexually. And sexual abuse can also affect boys. And for some boys that end up with a homosexual orientation, sexual abuse has played a role. Or early pornography exposure, there can be a number of sexual experiences that can confuse a child in their orientation.
I remember in 4th grade, I went to a birthday party. And at this birthday party, I was raped by several men.
My earliest childhood memories of the dysfunction of sexual brokenness came in as a result of a friend of a family molesting me as a little boy at 6 years of age.
At age 13, I think I just became a target towards an older boy in church, and he ended up sexually molesting me, and that went on for several years.
This man very kindly drew me into a place of trust, and he drew me into the mindset that what he was doing was somehow loving me. That brought in a lot of distortion into my mind and my thinking about who I was as a little boy.
When that boy feels this phenomenal sense of pleasure for the first time, it's like it implants in their brain this wonderful euphoric feeling. So they can think, oh, I must be a homosexual.
I hated the fact that he touched me, but there came a point to where I almost wanted him to do it. It was very, very conflicting to me.
Growing up, I was sexually abused. From there, I got into drugs and alcohol.
When I was sexually abused, I remember thinking, at least I'm getting some attention.
He spoke over me and said, the reason why this is happening to you is because you wanted this to happen. And what's so traumatic for an abused person is those words sink into them.
I was molested as a young boy from somebody else in my family. And that happened for years and years and years and years.
My sexual abuse started when I was 5 years old, 5 or 6. And I never really said anything about it. And then it started happening with peers that were older than me, and I didn't know what to do. I thought it was normal.
They think it's natural, but that does not define any person when there is inappropriate touch.
I thought that I was the reason why this was happening.
As you can imagine, that certainly made me very confused about who I was.
When I was 4 years old, I was sexually molested by a teen.
It started from thoughts like, maybe this is okay. If this is okay, let's try it out. And then I started to like trying it out.
I somehow felt responsible for what had happened. It had involved this older boy having had pornography.
Pornography was actually the doorknob on the handle when the door was opened. Everyone was curious and they're looking at these pictures, and then how about we try these pictures out? We don't have the female gender, but we have the male gender.
I was only 8 years old, but the scoutmaster said that he would take extra care to make sure that none of the boys gave me any problems, and of course that meant spending time in his tent.
Some of my earliest memories are of being involved sexually with other young boys when I was in kindergarten and 1st and 2nd grade.
I began to realize that he was pulling me in, and how great that felt. How that felt like what I thought my dad should be doing.
One of the lessons that I learned was that if you get close to a guy, it's going to turn sexual, and I didn't want that to happen.
Things progressed fairly rapidly into a very violent situation on a camp out. But actually, what happened afterwards was worse.
I would pray over and over again for forgiveness. I felt a lot of intense guilt and shame about those experiences.
When we went back home, I told my brother. And my brother, who loved his scoutmaster and was embarrassed by his little brother, just hauled off and hit me as hard as he could, a pain that I've never forgotten, and said, "Don't you ever say that again." I told my mother, and she said, "It's not nice to make things up about people." And so I went into a period of silence.
The two women, particularly that I went to high school with, were involved with each other, but one of them also flirted with me, which of course messed me up a lot.
When I was 10 years old, older Girl Scout, we started to play and it became a sexual relationship.
She would hold my hand underneath the seats, the movie seats, and things like that. You know, just that terrible mixed message. I started to question who I was.
I got into film at a young age. I was one of the original SpaghettiOs kids, and my parents actually got a divorce when I was a young man. I was 2 years old.
I felt the tenderness. I felt the touch of another woman, which was almost more than I could handle. It certainly awakened the desires that shouldn't have been awakened.
My dad was out of the picture and stuff. My mom, you know, she saw different men and stuff, and you know, we saw her engaged in relationships with other men.
Around the age of 16, I had started a job at the local mall and had to run in to use the restroom real quick, and a guy attempted to touch me. I just freaked out and ran out of there, but I got home and the seed had been planted that why would he do that to me? There is something different about me. Why would he think he could even do that?
She would let people take care of us, and you know, some of the people that would take care of us, you know, molested me.
By 15, I knew that what had happened wasn't right, that was called abuse, that having relationship with a person of the same sex wasn't God's plan.
Shortly thereafter, I went in again, and unfortunately there was someone else there that day as well, and that time I allowed him to do some sexual activity with me, and then before I knew it, that was almost a weekly occurrence.
I felt very vulnerable, and I felt afraid. I saw being a girl as being dangerous, and overnight I turned into a serious tomboy.
I was in 7th grade when I was molested, had never had anything lower than a B in school. And the very next year for 8th grade, I was an F student.
That was the basis of my fairly healthy world being cracked in half and a new girl emerging who was very, very broken.
It was the molestation that altered the course of my life. It basically killed who I really was.